If you have ADHD and want to become a successful entrepreneur, then you have to learn the mistakes that all of us ADHD entrepreneurs are prone to make, or you will fail. Let's get into it. When I started my first business, I just kind of winged it and was thankfully successful-ish, but would have been way more successful, less-ish, had I actually planned correctly. And if you're like me, you have an inattentive type ADHD, which means that boring shit is really hard for you to navigate. But the boring shit is the shit that makes your business thrive. So mistake number one is skipping the boring stuff and not planning correctly. You need to do your SWOT analyses, your proof of concept. These things are going to be drags in the beginning if you're not into it, but they help your business so much because they give you a clear perspective. Now, if you're not familiar, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And what that is just essentially a grid that talks about what your business is going to be good at, where you're going to be struggling, so that you have a better definition and a better perspective on what it is your business is going to need to thrive. I actually made a whole SWOT template and broken it down to make sure it's as idiot-proof and easy as possible. It's available on betterbizschool.com, so you can check it out for free and download it right there. But one of the things a lot of us struggle with in particular is buying stuff we don't need because we think we might someday. I've noticed in my own horrid American Express statement collection is that I am someone who gets very excited about the prospect of what could be and don't really focus on what is. Consequently, my purchase history on appsumo.com is full of things that I don't even know what they are anymore. I would say I probably use about, let's be generous and say 2/3, but probably not. It's probably closer to half or even a third of all of the things I've purchased and either missed the return window or thought oh, I'll use that someday, and I don't. And it sits there. And that's something that I've noticed a lot of us people with ADHD will do, is that we'll impulse buy and we'll use the idea of, well, I could use it someday, and we don't. So my suggestion for how to fix that, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. I would say recognize your limitations as a person with a credit card and a business, and don't let yourself fall prone to that impulse buying. I'm not really the best person to tell you how to do that. What I have found to be somewhat successful is to give myself a budget and to avoid AppSumo as much as I can until I am looking for something specific. Does that work all the time? No, but it works enough. That's my best advice. But it's interesting because that segues into another problem that I've noticed a lot of ADHD entrepreneurs have, and that is thinking they need to learn everything right away. Because if they don't, then they don't know what they don't know. That's something that can trip up any entrepreneur, ADHD or otherwise, because you get stuck in this analysis paralysis of, I feel like I really don't know Facebook enough to have a social media strategy. So I'm going to learn about all of that and never implement any sort of social media strategy. It becomes this sort of way to dodge action by using education as an excuse, if that makes sense. So my recommendation, those sites that have the blogger's toolkit, and it's hundreds of courses and ebooks and checklists and things, and they all bundle it together for one low price. Stay away from those because all they do is give you a deluge of information when all you needed was a trickle. And you kind of get the FOMO with that stuff. So that goes back to the don't buy things you don't need. It's the same point too, is that you need to learn just the basics to get to where you need to get. Going back to the example, if you don't know Facebook, that doesn't mean that you are stymied from doing an entire social media plan. That just means that you have to focus on Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube, Pinterest. There are so many other things. You don't need to hold up an entire strategy because one component is MIA, which goes to the next point of perfection. How many things have we all done? It died. Oh no, my light died. I'm not going to be interesting anymore. Oh well. We'll keep going. How many times have you not done something because it wasn't perfect? Like you thought, I can't get on YouTube because my face is weird or my voice is weird, or I can't launch a business because I don't know everything about X. I used to be that way. I was very much a person who felt like if I wasn't showing that I was an expert and if I wasn't projecting that I knew what I was doing, then I was going to lose. When it's the complete opposite, especially now. People buy from people now more than ever. And so the authenticity is what people love to buy. They love to support a person because it creates this tribalism and this feeling of being connected. And so when you wait for perfection, not only do you prevent yourself from growing that community that supports you, but you let your competition get ahead of you too. And that's probably the worst feeling of all. Seeing someone thrive when you were on the same path but didn't take the risk of not being perfect. And one of the things that a lot of business gurus will teach is what's known as an MVP, minimum viable product. And what that is a huge uncomfortable spot for people with ADHD or anybody who feels like they have to be perfect. Minimum viable product means that you have enough of a concept that you can sell it as is, and it will grow and perfect and tweak the longer it's in the market, because you'll utilize the marketplace to tell you what that product or service needs to be. And that's what I'm going to challenge you to do right now. Can you get your first product or service live by the end of the month? Can you? We're running a challenge in Better Biz School about this, and so I definitely suggest you sign up if you can make it in time. Speaking of getting a product launch, there's another thing that people with ADHD will tend to do, and that is not let things marinate and not let them have their chance to thrive. When I was running my soap and skincare company, every year I changed the packaging for it because I got bored with it. My first year was this pulp comic theme. The next one went into like a Whole Foods crunchy natural aesthetic. The next one went into bolder colors. The next one went into black, and so on and so forth. It became such a problem that I couldn't see was a problem because I wasn't giving my packaging and my branding time to establish itself in the marketplace. I changed my business name twice. It was originally Metropolis Soap Company, and then it went to MSC Skincare and Home. When I didn't really need to do that, I thought that it was limiting, especially because I was doing candles and home scents and things like that. But let's be honest, despite it being what I call an industry darling because it won all these awards, it wasn't well known enough that people were going to be like, where did Metropolis Soap Company go? Like, it was all in my head. And that's what I think so many entrepreneurs with ADHD do, is they get in their own heads about something and they don't have the right perspective on it. And so they'll let things quickly drop when they should let them settle and marinate and see how it works in the marketplace. Speaking of, one of the biggest problems many of us face, myself included, is the unwillingness to bring it out to market and ask for feedback. So many business gurus will tell you that one of the things you really need to do is to get outside feedback on your product or service and see what it is, like what blind spots you have as the producer of it, because it's your baby, like it's something that you have created from scratch. You've hopefully done the research and things, and you think that you know what it's supposed to be and what it's going to do, and that you're using the right verbiage to sell it when you're not. And I think so many of us with ADHD have RSD.
Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, RSD, as when you experience severe emotional pain because of a failure or feeling rejected. This condition is linked to ADHD, and experts suspect it happens due to differences in brain structure.
And we'll let that fear of rejection prevent us from being vulnerable enough to ask somebody, I know that you bought this, but what did you think about it? And was there anything I could have done better for you? And then you ask multiple people that, or potential customers that, or even worse, people I'm launching this thing. Will you look at it and tell me what you think? How terrifying is that? I know. But it's such a critical part of the process. You have to ask for outside help because, again, you've been in the trenches for so long building this. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know those blind spots that you've developed. Being in business means having to let yourself be a little bit vulnerable while also developing, paradoxically, the ability to not care. And it's a difficult balancing act, and you won't always get it right, but it's still something that I think you should really take into consideration, is the fact that you are so close to your product that you can't see it for what it is. And that's something so many people get in trouble with. Consequently, they don't develop very good funnels into these products. A funnel is meant to bring a potential customer through so that they learn enough about the business from zero to buy. It starts with know, K-N-O-W. They learn about you or your product or your service, and then they decide, do I want to keep looking into this or not? Then it moves into like. Do they like you? Do they like what you have to say? Do they like your company's values? Do they like what your product is going to do? Do they like the transformation you're promising? Then they can decide no, or they can move down into trust. Trust is that I believe what you're saying. I've done enough research on your website, your social, you have enough testimonials, you've shown me the product or the demo, I've had a try, whatever. I'm ready to buy. Not everybody gets through that funnel, but you can't ignore building a funnel. And I think that goes back to RSD with some of us, that it's a concern that you're going to scare off too many people, so you don't build it at all. And you think it's too overwhelming, it's too much work. How do I get people in the first place when all I want them to do is just buy my soap? Why does there have to be a whole process behind it? Well, there has to be a whole process because of the life cycle of your customer. You don't want a one and done person, even though you think like you might, because then they won't bother you anymore. But you want them to be someone who keeps coming back to you, someone who recommends you, someone who follows you on social. All of those things, you need that connection. And so you need to build that like dating. You need to take them through this process of learning about you, figuring out that they like what you have to say and what you do, and then committing. You've got to build the direct path. There's no way around it. I'm sorry. I know that's way more work than you probably were thinking, but I want you to be successful. And I am your business strategist, so we're gonna do this the right way. That's why we're going to avoid the other part that ADHD entrepreneurs will get wrong all the time, and that is focusing on the creative without looking at the data. One of the quirks or qualities that we're often told is that people with ADHD tend to be more creative and tend to have the ability to think outside the box, and that is our superpower. I have a whole problem with that, but that's another story for another day. And so some of us will get so wrapped up in feeling like I'm the creative, I'm the artist, I'm the developer, I'm the thinker, I'm that person, that we don't do the fundamentals and we don't look at the data. Businesses die without data. Even if you look at successful, this is hard to say, successful Etsy artists, you'll notice that while they may have a certain air of just, I paint and everybody loves it and they just buy, there's actually a very good business strategy behind them. They have a solid YouTube following that takes you behind the scenes as they paint, or studio tours or things like that. And they use that data to bring you into their sales funnel. Hopefully they monitor what is working and what isn't. And that's the same that I want for you too. I want you to start looking at your analytics, even if it's just once a week. Well, not more than once a week actually, because I don't want you to get bogged down by it and start hyperfixating on the things that you don't really need to hyperfixate on. But start looking for things that can help you gain an unfair advantage in the marketplace. What I mean by that is, let's say you have 5 soaps and your rosemary mint is just far and away your best seller. Well, you can use that data to realize that 1, you should be buying more rosemary and spearmint essential oils. You should be buying those in bulk. 2, you could probably expand that line to lotions or candles or whatever. 3, you start realizing there's a seasonality to it where you need to ramp up production when things start getting a little bit colder and people start liking that little like crisp spearmint thing. 4, you start realizing that maybe that poppy seed soap isn't doing as well as you had expected. So you begin to phase that out, saving you money. This is how all that data works. And it is why in business, you can't just be creative. You have to be creative and use the data that you have available to become analytical too. Which leads me to my next point. It kind of goes back to being afraid to ask for feedback, but I am particularly guilty of this, and that is not looking at the product or service after you've launched it. I just redid my website and was going through it and realized that on the sidebar of my blog, my picture was broken. How long has it been like that? I have no idea. That's not a good way to run my business. That's not a smart way to show that I am a capable business strategist if I'm not even looking and making sure that everything on my site works correctly. But I know I'm not alone in that. So many other entrepreneurs I've talked to who are neurodivergent feel, I think it's another thing that has to do with being afraid of being vulnerable or like finding something bad and just being so humiliated or embarrassed by your screw up that you just rather wouldn't know about it at all, which is a terrible way to run a business. So do as I say and not as my history has shown, and look at your website and look at your product pages. Look at the copy. Make sure you didn't like copy and paste it. Now it has those weird, winding things. Make sure that you're projecting professional business to the public, unlike me. And finally, can you believe we got to 10 this fast? It feels like it's been like an hour-long lecture. It has not been. Last but not least, oh my God, this is the one that hurts the most. Too many products or too many services. For me, when I was running Metropolis Soap, my biggest product catalog was 17 soaps, I think 7 or 8 candles, 7 or 8, what are they called? Reed diffusers, lotions, scrubs, lip balms. I had like 10 flavors of lip balm once. I made those all myself. Why? I don't know. Because I was afraid that someone would come up to me at a show and be like, do you have this? And I'd be like, no, I don't have that. And then I would have lost a sale. Meanwhile, a smarter business person would have said, that's not my customer. That's okay. Because the people who like scented soaps or like rosemary spearmint candles are going to find me because I'm going to pitch to them. That's a whole other story. Basically, I have to be confident in my product line because I know that if I've done my work correctly, and I've done my homework, and I've found the people who get what I'm doing, they're going to flock to me. Whereas if I'm trying to be everything to everybody and have a product catalog of 50 plus products all made by one person, I'm going to drive myself crazy. And that's what I did. And that's why I burned out and closed my business. And if you want to get into that story, I would say watch this video next because that goes into why I burned out and how you can prevent that too. But otherwise, I hope this was helpful, and if anything, I want you to realize that these mistakes are really commonplace and should not feel bad if you noticed a couple of them that you've done. This is the perfect time for you to go about change and make that change happen, and you can do it. I have faith in you. I'll see you in the next video. Check out that burnout one.